Today at 1, record top grade GCSE results after a second year without exams.
Oh my gosh.
The pass rate is up too, with some teachers saying their assessments are more accurate than exams.
They have been assessed and awarded results on the merit of what they have produced, and that can't be taken away from them.
Labour says the government is failing state school pupils whose grades have fallen even further behind those in private education. Also this lunchtime. The NHS waiting list in England hits a record high of almost 5.5 million. In Afghanistan, could Taliban rule see a return to strict Sharia law? We have a special report. Calls for the Dangerous Dogs Act to be reviewed. Critics say the 30-year-old law doesn't work and dog attacks are up. And rain delays play in the second test, with India put into bat by England on 46 for no wicket.
And coming up in sport on the BBC News channel, British #1 Jo Konta fights back to reach the third round of the Canadian Open, where she'll play Coco Gauff later.
Good afternoon. You're watching BBC News. Almost 5.5 million people in England were waiting to start routine NHS hospital treatment at the end of June. That's the highest number since records began back in 2007. Here's Lakshmi Gopal.
Waiting in pain for nearly a year, Lucy Morley-Williams needs a hip replacement to treat her arthritis.
It's limbo. My life is disabled. It's on hold. It's almost like a little grieving process every time it gets worse. So it's psychological as well.
Joanna Crane was told in April she needs surgery to replace a leaky heart valve. She's still waiting.
It obviously does get to you. You're kind of living every day hoping that you're going to get that call, because I know that I need that surgery. And the more I'm waiting, I know that I'm getting more unhealthy because of it.
A record number of people are now waiting for routine NHS hospital treatment in England, nearly 5.5 million. There has been a drop in those waiting for more than a year, down to just over 300,000. But the number waiting for more than 2 years has gone up to nearly 6,000, a 46% increase on the previous month, according to the Royal College of Surgeons. The organisation says demand for hospital beds and staff shortages from being pinged by the COVID app are causing a volatile mix of pressures on surgery.
I think waiting lists will rise because there will be a huge increase in demand, and I think, again, people understand that. But the important thing is that we are providing the NHS with the resources that it needs.
The government says it's given the NHS £1 billion this year to clear the backlog. But a leading NHS members organisation says that isn't nearly enough.
What we can't do is magic treatment out of thin air. What we need is money, but we also need to invest that money in a larger workforce, and that is fundamental to getting through this backlog.
I have an appointment at 2:20 to collect an ECG monitor.
Doncaster Royal Infirmary is trying to drive down waiting lists using a drive-through service. Instead of going into the clinic, patients fit heart monitors themselves at home.
So it's much quicker, the patient experience is better and the quality is just the same. And that's meant that we've been able to do more tests that we have to do face-to-face on site.
While efforts are making some inroads into the backlog, there are warnings that waiting lists could more than double by next year. And many patients must continue their wait without knowing for sure when it will end. Lakshmi Gopal, BBC News.
Well, our health editor Hugh Pym is here. You just heard Chris Hobson there from NHS providers saying we can't magic treatment out of nowhere. We need money. Sajid Javid, new health secretary, going into a spending review in the autumn. He's going to have to whack this up the order of priorities, isn't he? Health?
Well, I think that's absolutely right, Clive. And he actually, in an interview a couple of days ago, dropped a pretty strong hint that more investment was needed. The government had pledged, he said, more money for the NHS a couple of years ago. but those plans would need to be reassessed and more money would be required. But obviously battles ahead possibly with the Chancellor on that one. The scale of the problem is potentially huge, and the Health Secretary himself has said the waiting list, which we learned today for England, was just over 5.4 million, could be 13 million in a year or so's time. The problem they've got is you've got new patients coming in the whole time who want treatment, and the NHS really wants them to come forward and have treatment. You've got the backlog of people who've been waiting sometimes more than a year for a non-urgent operation like a hip replacement. And then you've got potentially millions more who didn't come forward for treatment last year because of the pandemic. They were worried about going into hospitals, who may yet come and present and need hospital care. Now, that being said, the numbers waiting more than a year have been reduced, though they're still relatively pretty high. And NHS England says they're doing a lot more diagnostics, more cancer services than they were a year ago, and that they are doing the best they can also to reduce the backlog. But it's a huge task ahead, and it's certainly rising rapidly up the political agenda.
Sure. OK, Hugh, many thanks. Our health editor, Hugh Pitt. Aid agencies have warned of a catastrophe for civilians in Afghanistan as the Taliban continues to advance across the country despite ongoing peace talks. Negotiations between the militants and the Afghan government are taking place in Doha in the Gulf state of Qatar. The Taliban delegation says life under its rule will be different for Afghan civilians compared to 1990. But the fear is the group's strict interpretation of Sharia law will return. With more, here's Yelda Haki.
Afghanistan 2021. The Taliban are back, taking city after city from government forces. The withdrawal of foreign troops has left a power vacuum the Taliban are rushing to fill. If they take power, many people here fear a return to their brutal regime of the 90s, characterized by public executions, stonings, and girls being banned from school. Despite the historic peace deal that was signed between the US and the Taliban in February 2020 and the ongoing peace talks taking place in Doha, Qatar between the Afghan government and the Taliban, no progress has been made. I travelled to Doha to meet with Suhail Shaheen, a member of the Taliban peace negotiation team. If you were to return to Kabul, how would you govern?
There was in the past some mistakes that we have learned from, because at that time you were new to the government. To stop education of women and girls, that is not our goal. Of course, education is their right, and it is much needed.
While Suhail Shaheen continues to talk about peace, it's clearly not a view shared by Taliban commanders closing in on Afghanistan's cities. Back in Kabul, Taliban commander Maulana from Helmand agreed to meet me. What do you want? Do you want the Taliban regime to come back into power? Or do you think that there should be a power-sharing deal with the current government, like the discussions that are being had in Doha?
We would be happy to have a joint government under the umbrella of Islamic Sharia. A Sharia-based system in Afghanistan, like the system the Taliban used to have.
If we talk about law and order and justice, if someone were to steal or commit adultery, what should happen to them?
All this is clearly stated in the Quran. If someone steals, there is a punishment. For example, for some thefts, the punishment is cutting off the hand and foot. And if someone commits adultery, then they should be stoned.
And if there isn't a political resolution to this conflict, are you prepared to take Kabul by force?
I'm trying to defeat the government, and they're trying to make me disappear. In the end, we'll be compelled to kill one another.
Increasingly, it appears there is a disconnect between what is being said by the political office in Doha and what the Taliban commanders and foot soldiers are doing on the ground in Afghanistan. But the Vice President of Afghanistan remains defiant.
This group in Doha, they are a deceptive facade of a very dark reality called the Taliban.
So in your view, have they changed?
No, not only they have not changed, they have become savvier in deceiving.
With the government adamant to defy a new era of Sharia law and the Taliban making significant gains, Afghans now seem to be caught up in a savage war that has taken on a life of its own. Yalda Hakim, BBC News, Kabul.
Well, our correspondent Yogita Limai is in Kabul for us this afternoon. Yogita, now there are claims of a 10th provincial capital that's fallen to the Taliban?
That's right, Ghazni, which is only about 100 miles south of Kabul. The Taliban claimed they had taken over this morning. We've checked with local sources on the ground and they confirmed to us that the insurgent group is there. We've also spoken to a provincial council member from the Afghan government who said that all of the city has been taken over except one police building on the outskirts of the city. So yes, within 7 days, 10 provincial capitals, and the Taliban continuing their offensive in the south of the country aggressively. They're already controlling most of the north of Afghanistan. Here in the south, in Kandahar, yesterday they broke into the city's central jail and released more than 1,000 prisoners. In Lashkargah, which is the capital of the Helmand province, they took over a police headquarters, which the Taliban will see as a major victory. Afghan government forces say they're putting in all they can to defend these cities. They are in control of most of the major cities in Afghanistan right now, but there are fierce battles going on in many of them.
OK, Yogita, thank you. Yogita Limai there, live in Kabul. GCSE students in England, Wales and Northern Ireland have received another set of record grades after exams were disrupted by the coronavirus pandemic. Top grades rose by 2.7% to almost 29%, while the pass rate is also slightly up. The government had to cancel exams for a second consecutive year, so pupils' grades have been based on teacher assessment, drawing some criticism over grade inflation. With the very latest, here's our education correspondent, Elaine Dunkley.
The moment anxiety and fear disappears. In their grasp, the GCSE results these students need to put a difficult journey behind them.
There's no words for it, really. It's just utter relief at this point. As soon as I opened my paper and I saw the results that I've got and what I've worked so hard for over the last 5 years, especially with the disruption we faced, it's just the tears of joy. It's just, I couldn't control it.
Definitely satisfied. Definitely will get me to where I want to be. I'm also a level 9 achieving student and haven't got any 9s today, but like I said before, the sky's the limit, so we go full.
The results mark the end of high school. This year's students have felt the most disruption to their studies with lockdowns and remote learning.
I have to be honest, it was hard at times seeing your child cry, saying, "Mummy, I don't know what's happening, will we have GCSEs?" and trying to reassure them, but you know you've got all that turmoil inside. But the children, like I said, have been humbled by their characters, how they've come out and still smiling, and to receive these results, it's just been wow.
With exams cancelled and replaced with teacher-assessed grades, this head teacher says the different approach means comparisons with previous years are unhelpful.
I just don't think this is a year that we can compare to previous years. It's a very different context. The materials were published online. The students had access to them. They knew kind of what the topics were going to be and the direction for their revision. You would only expect, therefore, that revision to be more focused and, therefore, for them to perform better.
Students in Wales and Northern Ireland also received results today. Compared to A-levels, grade inflation for GCSEs has been modest, but there is concern today's results show a further widening of the gap in inequalities. In England, 61% of pupils in independent schools received top grades, compared with 26% in state schools.
The pandemic has, of course, exacerbated amplified those inequalities, and that's why we were so determined to get young people back into schools. Schools were the last to close, the first to open as we emerged from the pandemic.
Labour says without a more ambitious recovery plan for education, inequality could be the lasting legacy of COVID.
What I want to see is a first-class education for every child, whoever they are and wherever they come from. What we've seen today is baked in inequality. The gap between those going to private schools and going to state schools has got bigger rather than smaller. So
today's results are about more than academic achievement. It's about recognising the struggles that many have faced. Molly has done a BTEC in business.
Unfortunately, I lost my step-granddad and my dad in May and June. So yeah, it's just been like really tough. Anything for me, just being a pass is gonna like really make me obviously happy, but if I get anything better than a pass, then considering the year I've had, I'm gonna be extremely happy with myself.
These students have studied through nearly 2 years of disruption. In turbulent times, success is all the sweeter. Elaine Dunkley, BBC News.
Well, our correspondent Chris Page is at a school in Belfast for us. Chris, top grades in Northern Ireland as well. Grade inflation there too.
Well, certainly it's been a record-breaking year of GCSE success here in Northern Ireland. About 40% of entries have received an A, or better still, an A star grade. To put that rise in context, well, last year the figure was 37%. Pre-COVID, the year before that, 2019, was 32%. So here at Ashfield Girls High School in East Belfast, pupils have been coming and going in small groups at intervals throughout the morning. There's been a sense of tension, yes, and nervousness, of course, but also relief and, in many cases, sheer joy whenever the envelopes were opened. The Education Minister in the devolved government at Stormont, Michelle McIlveen of the Democratic Unionist Party, has congratulated all the students. She has pointed out that they deserve special credit because they are the only year group who has had the experience of not one but 2 periods of being out of the classroom for a sustained length of time over the 2 years that they've been covering their GCSE courses. Northern Ireland has come top of the class amongst the devolved nations when it comes to those best grades, a higher proportion of A's and A stars handed out here compared with England and Wales.
OK, Chris, thank you for that. Chris Page there in Belfast. Well, our political correspondent Nick Eardley is at Westminster for us now. Nick, grade inflation, many people seem to accept that's really a consequence of coronavirus. Not a lot you can do about that. But the suggestion that that divide between state schools and private schools has been made worse, exacerbated by everything we've seen.
Yeah, absolutely, Clive. Ministers have been arguing this morning that this was an unprecedented year and the unique challenges of the pandemic mean that they just had to find a way of getting young people to progress with their education. But I do think they are going to come under some pressure over these results. Firstly, on the attainment gap, as you mentioned, that gap between children who are on free school meals and those who aren't. Ofqual have admitted today that that's grown, and Labour say it's just not good enough. Their leader, Keir Starmer, saying this morning that inequality was now baked into the system, giving the Education Secretary a U for the issue of tackling inequality. Now, it's worth pointing out that that's happened in different parts of the UK, including in Labour-run Wales. But for Boris Johnson's government that talks so much about levelling up, that is going to be a challenge over the next few months and years to come up with a system that allows them to tackle inequality.
OK, Nick, thanks for that. Nick Eardley there at Westminster. The UK economy grew by 4.8% in the second quarter of the year as coronavirus restrictions were lifted. The retail sector, hotels and restaurants helped growth. However, the figure is slightly below the 5% the Bank of England had predicted. Here's Andy Verity.
Just have a look around. For restaurant founder and owner Asma Khan, the last 18 months have been filled with insecurity and fear, forced like thousands of other firms to borrow her way through the pandemic.
I'm very grateful for the furlough. It allowed me to keep my entire staff on furlough, but there was no support for me. I was still liable for all the rents and all the financial costs mounted up.
Watching with dismay as independent restaurants went under, she took a big chance, borrowing to buy the flagship Covent Garden outlet of a well-known chain that had collapsed. And now customers are surging back.
It's a relief. I mean, we had, I think, 1,300 bookings in 5 hours. When we started opening up all the other dates. So it's really, you need this.
The economy has been on a roller coaster ride since the start of the pandemic, plummeting in spring of last year before surging back as restrictions were lifted, and then going into a double dip at the start of this year when restrictions were reimposed. Since then, it's been recovering, but still not quite back up to its pre-pandemic level.
Well, today's figures show that the economy is recovering very strongly, fastest quarterly growth in the G7 group of countries, and evidence that our plan for jobs is working. But I'm not complacent. The shock that our economy and public finances have experienced is significant, and it will take us time to fully recover.
In June, as the summer began, some sectors like exports of cars slowed down, hit by a shortage of parts and also staff as the pingdemic and nervousness about the virus kept them at home.
And I think that nervousness might stay with us a bit as we go into the winter, and that in turn will hold back the recovery, the final stages of the recovery in consumer spending.
Even after growth of 4.8%, the economy remains 4.4% below where it was at the end of 2019. Business may be recovering, but it's not yet fully recovered. Andy Verity, BBC News.
The time is 20 minutes past 1. Our top story this lunchtime. And record GCSE grades have been achieved in England, Wales and Northern Ireland after a second year of cancelled exams. And coming up, temperatures continue to soar to record-breaking heights in Italy.
And coming up in sport on the BBC News channel, 3 years after he retired, former heavyweight and cruiserweight champion David Haye announces his return to the ring for a one-off fight in September.
A teenage human rights campaigner in London has sent an open letter to the Foreign Secretary calling for urgent help for China's Uyghur Muslims. Dilnaz Karim's father had to flee China for teaching Islam, and he claims he was tortured there. Adina Campbell has been to meet them.
I've seen them personally, and them saying that they don't exist is wrong because I've met them. They say that my family living a happy life. But on the other hand, we hear that they have been sentenced for 10 years, 12 years for practicing religion.
Thousands of miles away from their loved ones in China, 18-year-old Dilnaz and her father Karim are campaigning for justice. Justice from the Chinese authorities, who sent Karim to prison in the 1990s.
They kept beating him up, burning his hand with cigarettes, hanging him with hands like that. And he said that at the end of his imprisonment, which was 6 months long, he wasn't able to stand up.
Karim fled China after serving his time in jail for national hatred and holding a protest, crimes he denies. He and his family say the Uyghur community in northwest China are still at risk and continue to face brutal abuse by the authorities because of their cultural background. How do you feel about the Chinese authorities?
They're killing people, they're torturing people in concentration camps, forcibly sterilizing and raping women.
We asked the Chinese embassy for a response. They have previously denied all allegations of human rights abuses. Dilnaz and her family now live in London, but fear for the lives of their other relatives who they haven't seen in 6 years.
They're committing human rights offences on a massive scale.
They and other human rights campaigners have been holding monthly protests outside the Chinese embassy.
It makes me feel angry that the world is not acting up for this. I mean, the Chinese government is committing crime. They should stop this.
Karim still bears the physical scars from his time in prison.
This was a scar.
And there's emotional trauma for Dilnaz, who has regular nightmares. Do you feel like an ordinary 18-year-old?
No, because if I was an ordinary 18 years old, I would be now living my best life. But that's not what I'm doing. I'm trying to explore new ways to free my people sooner.
Adina Campbell, BBC News.
Welfare charities say the Dangerous Dogs Act needs a complete overhaul on this 30th anniversary of the force. 4 breeds can currently be seized by police and either be put down or kept under strict conditions. Here's Charlotte Gallagher.
Meet Alex. He's 10 years old.
Alex, look at me.
In dog years, a senior citizen. But his life is very different to that of most other dogs. That's because he's been judged to be a pit bull type animal, a banned breed in the UK. His owner Sian is only allowed to keep him if she sticks to certain conditions.
His life is very restricted, and it's up to us as his owners, myself and my husband, to ensure that he has a full and active life. So he has to be muzzled and on a restricted length lead, held by someone over the age of 16 at all times in a public place, and that includes the car. He can't run free unless he's in a secure area.
The Dangerous Dogs Act bans 4 different breeds: Pit Bull Terrier, Dogo Argentino, Fila Brasileiro and Japanese Tosa. Dogs suspected of being a banned type can be seized by the police. They'll either be put down or returned to the owner and, like Alex, be kept under strict conditions. The RSPCA and other charities say the law discriminates against dogs like Alex because of what they look like, and doesn't work because the number of dog attacks has actually gone up. In the 20 years from 1999 to 2019, hospital admissions for dog bites increased by 154%, from 3,454 to 8,775. In the last 5 years, the RSPCA, Battersea and Blue Cross have destroyed 482 dogs that were judged to be a banned breed. Many of those had never attacked anyone. This is Fudge. Her owner believed she was a Staffordshire Bull Terrier, but like Alex, she was judged to be a pit bull type animal. She was taken by police and put down.
It was surreal that there was that many police would come for a puppy. She never did anything. She never bit anyone. She's never growled at anyone. Why is she dead?
If you do actually want to be able to effectively protect public safety, you need to very much be focusing on individual dogs and having legislation in place that allows you to tackle dogs based on their behaviour as opposed to how they look.
The government says the aim of the Dangerous Dogs Act is to ensure the safety of the public, adding it's commissioned research on the effectiveness of existing measures and on how to address behavioural problems among dogs. Charlotte Gallagher, BBC News.
The second test between England and India is underway at Lord's after a rain delay. The visitors put into bat a 46 without loss. Here's Joe Wilson.
A grey and gloomy start to the day at Lord's, but a sudden burst of light for England. He was fit. Yes, James Anderson was playing. He was bowling. He was appealing. Now, have another go. Well, India's batsmen knew it was their job to stay in. Don't edge that ball and fall. A connoisseur's morning. Ollie Robinson was bowling from the other end, trying the same thing. Well, that was close. England made changes to their team. That's Hasib Hamid fielding. He's valued for his classical batting. Some things stay in fashion. India's batsman waited for an opportunity. There, finally, was a ball to hit for 4. England's captain had decided to bowl first in favourable conditions. He needed to see wickets quickly. Well, for a batsman as good as Rohit Sharma, scoring runs like that is easy. India had adapted and flourished, and England knew it. Well, we have had another rain interruption. Players currently taking lunch. It's more floodlight than sunlight, but still not a bad view, is it? And what the players will be looking at, spectators too, is that all-important scorecard, which shows Rohit Sharma 35 not out, India 46 without loss, Clive. And make no mistake, from India's perspective, that looks beautiful.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Joe Wilson there at Lord's. The highest temperature ever recorded in Europe may have been registered in Italy. A reading from the island of Sicily registered 48.8 degrees Celsius yesterday. It's still to be verified. Here's Richard Galpin.
Here in southern Sicily, it's only 9:45 in the morning, but the temperature is already 38 degrees Celsius. And it's continuing to rise, hitting 47 degrees and then 48.8 by early afternoon. This reported to be the highest temperature ever recorded in Europe, beating the previous record of 48.5 degrees Celsius which had stood since 1977. The searing heat sparking wildfires across the region and other parts of southern Italy. Firefighters have been trying to battle the blazes day and night in many parts of Sicily and Calabria. At least 3 people have been killed.
This year has been difficult for us because of the intense heat. Next year we hope to be able to start our prevention works earlier so that we can prevent fires, especially in woods and particularly here in Etna Park.
The Italian authorities are now issuing red alerts for extreme heat in several regions. And the number of cities facing the highest health risk is expected to rise from 8 to 15 by Friday. Richard Galpin, BBC News.
Stav Danaeus has more on the weather and that heat wave across parts of Europe. Stav, no let up in that.
Absolutely not, Clive. It's pretty intense. Good afternoon to you. This temperature anomaly map shows how unevenly distributed the heat is across Europe, a little below average in the north, well above average across North Africa, the central, western Mediterranean. Of course, heat wave, which is affecting Greece and the Balkans, has been shifting its way westwards. We saw that temperature 48.8 Celsius in Syracuse in Sicily. We have to wait on this from the WMOC if this is verified, making it the highest temperature ever recorded in Europe. And towards Friday and the weekend, the heat shifts towards Iberia, where we could see 47 degrees for southern Spain at some point the weekend. This could challenge national records for Spain. So this heat wave is set to continue. Different story for us, though. We've got low pressure sweeping in. That's bringing fresher, stronger southwesterly winds across Scotland, Northern Ireland, around Irish Sea coast. Plenty of showers here, some which will be quite heavy. Rather grey skies across the south should tend to break up through the afternoon to allow for some sunny spells. And that could push temperatures up to 22 or 23 degrees, but cooler across the north. Now, through this evening and overnight, it stays blustery. Winds up to 30, 40 miles an hour in exposure across the northwest. These are average wind speeds, so a blustery night for all. Largely clear, apart from the odd shower across England and Wales. And a mild night to come, double-figure values for most. Certainly milder across the north of the country than what we had last night. Into Friday then, we've got high pressure to the south of the country, low pressure to the north. That's going to bring another blustery day for Scotland, Northern Ireland, with plenty of showers. Again, some of these could be quite heavy for western Scotland. I think eastern Scotland doing best with the dry and bright weather in the north. But for England and Wales, hello there. I think a better day, more sunshine across the south. As we head on in, a little bit of cloud here and there, 1 or 2 showers, otherwise mainly dry. And we could see temperatures low to mid-20s in the warmest spots, still the high teens now in the north. Now, the weekend giving us a bit of a headache. It's not going to be a dry, sunny, warm one by any means, but there will be some sunshine around. But we've got low pressure nearby, which could bring a bit more cloud and some patchy rain at places. Now, some uncertainty to the extent of this rain. It could be a little bit further northwards, perhaps into Northern Ireland. But at the moment, it looks like it could bring cloudier skies for much of England and Wales. The odd splash of rain, particularly around the Irish Sea and around northern and western Wales. Some sunshine to the south, perhaps, and probably a better day for Scotland and Northern Ireland with some sunny spells, temperatures 19 to 22 degrees. For Sunday, that area of low pressure weakens and moves across the country, so it could bring a lot more cloud around. Still, there could be some sunshine around. Still, though, cater for the odd shower to Clive.
Stav, thanks for that. And the reminder of our top story. Record GCSE grades achieved in England and Wales and Northern Ireland after a second year of cancelled exams. That's it. So, goodbye from me. Now on BBC One. Time for the news where you are. Have a very good afternoon.